When I was younger, people used to think money problems announced themselves loudly. A man would lose his job, a business would fail, a bank would call, a family would move, a tragedy would occur, and everyone would nod and say, yes, that is where the trouble began. I have lived long enough to know that most financial trouble begins much more quietly than that. It begins in ordinary months. Months where nothing dramatic happens, months where the paycheck arrives, the bills get paid, the weekend passes, the groceries are bought, the subscriptions renew, the car payment clears, the food delivery feels small, the new purchase feels deserved, and the person goes to bed thinking life is under control. Then the years pass, and one man looks up at 36 and has $340,000 invested, a paid-off car, a reserve account he barely thinks about, and a life that feels calm. Another man with almost the same salary, the same city, and the same broad opportunities looks up at 36 and has $11,000, a $780 car payment, a credit card balance he has been avoiding, and a kind of quiet fear that follows him everywhere, even when nothing is technically wrong. That is not a story about income. It is a story about habits so boring that almost nobody wants to respect them until the mathematics become too large to ignore. I want to tell you about two men, call one Marcus, call the other Derek. I use ordinary names because this is an ordinary story, and that is exactly why it matters. Walk into Marcus' apartment and you will not feel envy. There is a Honda Civic key hanging by the door. The couch is fine. The television is not new. There is a half-used bag of rice on the counter. There is probably something cooking slowly in a pot because Marcus learned a long time ago that convenience is often just another word for slowly leaking money. And if you looked in the drawer by the fridge, you would find a calendar where one note appears every year on the 1st or the 4th of January, 1K, plus 1%. That is all. Nothing cinematic. Nothing that makes strangers say, now there is a man who understands finance. Walk into Derek's place, and the energy is completely different. You notice the unopened espresso machine first because it cost enough to deserve attention. You notice the stack of Amazon returns by the door. You notice the Robinhood alerts on the phone screen. You notice the downtown parking receipt because he parked in the expensive lot again to save himself a 6-minute walk. You notice the subtle anxiety too, although most people would not call it that. It is the energy of a man who is constantly solving the present at the expense of the future, and then wondering why the future never seems to get easier. Same city, same job title, close enough in salary that the difference between them cannot be explained by income alone. And yet Marcus is on a path that, if left uninterrupted, will likely put him somewhere around $1.2 to $1.5 million by his mid-50s. Derek is on a path where every surprise still feels like a crisis. This sort of divergence fascinates me because it tells the truth about wealth. Wealth is not usually built by one big move. Not for most people. It is built by a structure, a system of behavior, a collection of repeated decisions that look so unglamorous in the present that almost nobody wants to believe they are powerful enough to matter. Then they matter more than everything else. The great lie financial culture keeps selling is that you have not yet built wealth because you have not found the right thing, the right stock, the right business idea, the right trade, the right side hustle. The implication is always the same. Out there somewhere is a secret lever, and once you discover it, the whole machine finally changes. I have spent too much of my life looking at real balance sheets to believe that story. The great majority of people who become financially strong do not do it by discovering a hidden lever. They do it by reducing leaks. They do it by automating the right behaviors. They do it by refusing to convert every increase in income into a more expensive life. They do it by buying productive assets repeatedly and then having the discipline to leave them alone. That is why I want to walk through 10 habits that look dull enough to be ignored and powerful enough to change almost any household that actually adopts them. The first is to automate savings before your brain gets involved. People like to think discipline is a character issue. Sometimes it is. Often it is an architecture issue. If saving money depends on a monthly debate between your present self and your future self is going to lose more often than you think. The present always has a voice. Rent is now, dinner is now. The sale ends tonight. The vacation is this month. The upgrade is visible. The future is abstract. Silent and patient. That is a terrible contest. You are asking your brain to choose between something emotionally real now and something mathematically important. Later in that fight, later gets postponed again and again until the person decides he must simply be bad with money. Number he has a weak system, A good system removes the debate. Money moves before it can be repurposed. The contribution happens before the person has a chance to imagine all the things the cash could do for him immediately. This is one reason automatic retirement contributions work so well. When the money leaves before the household emotionally adopts it, the sacrifice feels smaller and the results accumulate quietly. There was a woman named Grace Groner who understood this with a seriousness the world only noticed long after it had already made her extraordinary. In 1935, she bought 3 shares of Abbott Laboratories for $180 and allowed dividends to reinvest for decades. She lived modestly, worked steadily, and did not perform wealth. When she died at 100, those 3 shares had become $7.2 million. Now, people like to hear that story and imagine the lesson is to find an Abbott. That is not the main lesson. The main lesson is to build a structure that allows the machine to run for a very long time without emotional interruption. Grace did not become wealthy because she was dramatic. She became wealthy because she let boring continue uninterrupted. That is one of the deepest truths in all of finance. Boring, left alone, becomes astonishing. The second habit is to drive something paid off and slightly embarrassing. I do not say that for comic effect. I say it because the car payment has become one of the great middle-class destroyers of capital in this country. A new vehicle is now sold in monthly language rather than total cost language because monthly language anesthetizes people. $700 does not sound like a 6-figure life decision. $800 does not sound like $1 million opportunity cost over time. It sounds like a payment, a manageable payment. That is how people get trapped. The dealership stretches the loan, the monthly number drops, the total number rises, the asset depreciates. The borrower stays calm because the emotional story is about comfort and status, not arithmetic. Then the car is underwater, then it gets traded, then the negative equity gets rolled into the next loan, then the household is once again financing identity at a rate that would look shameful if it were displayed in total dollars instead of monthly installments. Marcus drove something paid off and slightly embarrassing. That is not because he lacked taste, it is because he understood a principle most people resist. Transportation is a support expense. It is not supposed to be a central character in your wealth story. Ronald Read understood that too. He worked as a gas station attendant and janitor, dressed modestly, drove a used Toyota Yaris, and died leaving around $8 million to charity. The public always wants these stories to have a hidden twist, as though there must have been a secret inheritance or brilliant speculation involved. Usually the twist is much less exciting. He let dull habits run for an extremely long time. That is all. A car payment rarely feels like a catastrophe. That is why it is so destructive. The third habit is to cook at home as though retirement depends on it, because in a way it does. Food spending is one of those categories that people exempt from seriousness because the purchases feel too ordinary to be meaningful. It is just lunch. It is just dinner. It is just delivery because I had a long day. It is just coffee because I deserve a moment. It is just one app order because cooking is tiring tonight. The problem is not the emotional logic of any single meal. The problem is repetition. Marcus spends about $420 a month on food. Derek spends roughly $900. The difference does not feel like wealth or poverty at the moment of purchase. It feels like convenience, spontaneity, and relief. But the annual difference is large enough, and over 20 or 25 years it becomes big enough to change a life. This is how wealth is usually lost. Not through one shameful scene, through 1,000 little purchases that never had to defend themselves as part of a system. Cooking at home is not romantic because it does not flatter the ego. It is just practical. It shifts the household from reacting to appetite toward organizing around intention. It is not only cheaper, it is calmer. And calm systems compound more effectively than chaotic ones. The fourth habit is to buy less house than the bank will let you. This one has made more people look successful and feel trapped than perhaps any other single decision in the American middle class. A bank's idea of what you can afford is not your idea of what you should carry if you want a future that includes reserves, investing, optionality, and peace of mind. A lender is asking a simpler question. Can this person probably keep paying us? You should be asking a harder one. If I buy this house, what future choices will I quietly lose? The bigger house is never only a bigger mortgage. It is larger property taxes, insurance, maintenance, furnishing expectations, repair scope, and a deeper commitment to a specific cost structure for decades. And because so much of the burden arrives later in fragments rather than up front in one humiliating bill, people keep telling themselves they can manage it. Of course, they can manage it. That is not the question. The question is what they gave away in order to manage it. There is something beautiful about a house that leaves room in the monthly system, a house that allows a family to absorb a broken water heater, a job transition, a medical surprise, or a market opportunity without panic. That is what a good house does. It gives shelter and leaves space. The wrong house gives shelter and takes space. That difference is invisible in the listing photos. It becomes painfully visible about 8 years later. The fifth habit is to track every dollar like it has somewhere better to be. Now, I do not mean turning life into a neurotic spreadsheet festival where every peppermint gets a category and every weekend becomes an accounting exercise. What I mean is simpler. You cannot make strategic decisions about money you are not looking at, honestly. Most households do not actually know where the leakage is. They know they feel tight. They know the checking account always seems smaller than it should be. They know their income is not terrible and yet their progress is. But they cannot explain why, because they do not observe their own behavior with enough honesty to see the pattern. It is not budgeting in the moral sense that matters. It is observation in the operational sense. What gets measured can be improved. What remains vaguely shameful and unexamined continues. People say they budget while routinely spending past it because what they really have is not a system. It is a number they feel guilty about after the fact. That is not useful. Marcus knows where the money goes. Derek knows how the month felt. Those are not the same thing. The sixth habit is to invest every raise before your lifestyle finds out it exists. This one may be the cleanest single rule on the list because it solves a problem most people do not even realize they have. Lifestyle inflation is one of the quietest forms of self-sabotage in finance because it arrives disguised as normalcy. The person gets a raise, feels responsible, and does not go do anything obviously foolish. He just eases a little, nicer parking, more lunches out, a better apartment, a little more convenience everywhere. The money disappears in ways he could not itemize even if you forced him to try. The brain adapts to a new level quickly. What felt luxurious in March feels ordinary in June. Then the raise is gone and the person says strange things like, I don't even know where it went. Marcus knew where it went because he moved it before he could feel it. The moment a raise was confirmed, he increased the retirement contribution. Not after a few months. Not after seeing how the cash flow felt before the first new paycheck arrived. That is the key. If the lifestyle never receives the full vote, it never feels the full loss. That is one of the most humane forms of discipline I know. It does not feel punitive. It simply prevents the future from being robbed by convenience. The seventh habit is to buy index funds and then do almost nothing. This sentence will never sell as well as the complicated one. It is too plain. It insults the ego of the person who wants markets to confirm his uniqueness. Yet the record is humiliatingly clear. Most people trying to outperform end up underperforming. Many professionals trying to outperform do too. Why? Because activity is expensive. Fees are expensive. Mistakes are expensive. Emotion is expensive. Taxes are expensive. Ego is expensive. The broad market, purchased at low cost and held with discipline, removes a shocking amount of self-inflicted damage from the process. Marcus owns broad index funds and barely checks them. That does not make him passive in life. It makes him rational in finance. He is not trying to be the smartest man in the room every quarter. He is trying to own productive enterprise over decades while avoiding the ways intelligent people sabotage themselves. Derek, like many restless people, keeps feeling he should be doing something. This stock that alert, a tip, a rotation, a change. The problem is not only that he might choose the wrong thing, the problem is that constant intervention prevents compounding from becoming visible. Every time the investor tries to improve the process emotionally, he often makes it weaker economically. The eighth habit is to build an emergency fund as though something will go wrong. Because something will. The reserve account is one of the most boring financial tools in existence. It does not compound attractively. It does not make dinner conversation sparkle. No one brags about the yield on their emergency fund at a party. And yet its importance is hard to overstate. A reserve is what keeps a market downturn from becoming a personal catastrophe. A reserve is what keeps a medical bill from turning into credit card debt. A reserve is what keeps a car repair from forcing the sale of productive assets at the worst possible time. A reserve is what keeps compounding alive through ordinary life. That is why I dislike when people say cash is trash without context. Idle cash that should be invested may be wasteful. Strategic cash that protects the entire system is one of the most valuable things a household can own. The investor who has to sell into panic because the dog got sick, the furnace died, or the job ended is not being punished by markets for being unlucky. he is being punished by a structure that never had enough protection built into it. The ninth habit is to ignore exciting financial opportunities that arrive too easily. This is a harder discipline than people think because human beings are highly susceptible to vivid stories and visible winners. A friend made money in a small stock, a cousin bought crypto early. Somebody at work found a syndication. Somebody on social media has a perfect life and attributes it to a strategy he is very happy to explain to strangers. It all looks so easy from outside. That is what makes it dangerous. The exciting opportunity usually arrives with the downside hidden and the upside lit. Like a stage reel, wealth building rarely markets itself that aggressively. Broad index ownership does not beg for your attention. Automatic retirement contributions do not flatter your need for uniqueness. Driving a paid off Civic does not create social proof. Slow cookers do not go viral. That is exactly why these things work. They are not competing for your ego. They are building your future. If someone is excited to bring you an opportunity, I become more skeptical. Not less, not because all new ideas are bad. Because anything vivid enough to arrive with enthusiasm may be vivid enough to bypass judgment. The 10th habit is to wait 72 hours before major discretionary purchases. This sounds too simple to matter and matters precisely because it is simple. Impulse desire has a half-life. The thing that felt urgent Tuesday night often feels optional by Friday morning. Most people mistake urgency for importance. They are not the same. A purchase that survives 3 days of calm usually deserves more respect than one that needed tonight's emotional weather to justify itself. A timer is more useful than willpower because willpower is an emotional contest and timers are neutral. You are not forbidding the purchase forever. You are asking a better question later. Marcus does not avoid all wants. He just does not let wants vote immediately. That is a very large advantage in a culture built to monetize impulse. Now, if you step back from these 10 habits, you begin seeing that they are not really about frugality in the childish sense. They are not about being cheap. They are not about depriving yourself for the joy of deprivation. They are about building one thing: margin. That is the word underneath all of this. Margin is the gap between what comes in and what must go out. Margin is the room to say no. Margin is the room to wait. Margin is the room to endure bad timing without being destroyed by it. Margin turns emergencies into inconveniences. Its absence turns inconveniences into emergencies. That is the true difference between Marcus and Derek, not character in some dramatic sense. Structure: Marcus has built margin. Derek keeps surrendering it. And when you surrender margin gradually enough, you do not notice the loss until life asks something of you. And you have nothing left to give except stress. The median retirement savings in this country remains painfully small relative to what people believe they will need. That gap did not appear because millions of people are incapable of effort. It appeared because millions of people allowed ordinary life to consume every raise, every margin improvement, every small advantage before compounding had enough time to become visible. That is why I admire people like Grace Groner and Ronald Reed so much. They were not marketed as geniuses. They simply let boring continue. That is all. And boring over long stretches becomes extraordinary. The culture keeps waiting for the exciting version of wealth building to arrive. The exciting version is usually the scam. This is the version: automatic transfers, a paid-off car, home-cooked meals, a smaller house, a real reserve. Broad market ownership, suspicion of easy opportunities, slow purchasing, incremental raises routed toward the future. That is the machine. It does not feel glorious up close. It feels almost laughably ordinary. Then 20 years pass, and one man has options. The other has explanations. That is how wealth usually looks in real life. Less like genius. More like a collection of unsexy decisions left alone long enough to become irreversible.